I met Paul and said, do you want to join my band, you know? And then George joined. And then Ringo joined. We were just a band who made it very, very big, that's all.
Hello there, my name's Scott, and welcome to Dig a Podcast, a show in which I give you an in-depth story behind the songs sung by the best band there is, was, and ever will be, the Beatles. In this season, Season 2, we work our way through the album Meet the Beatles, or our UK listeners know it as With the Beatles. Meet the Beatles is the second Beatles album released in the United States. It was the first US Beatles album to be issued by Capitol Records on 20th of January 1964 in both mono and stereo formats. It topped the popular album chart on the 15th of February 1964 and remained at number 1 for 11 weeks before being replaced by the Beatles' second album. The cover featured Robert Freeman's iconic portrait of the Beatles used in the UK for the With the Beatles, with a blue tint added to the original stark black and white photograph. Let's continue with track 2 on the Meet the Beatles album with
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I Saw Her Standing There. I Saw Her Standing There has the distinction of being one of the very first Beatles songs heard in the United States, thanks to being chosen by Capitol Records as the flip side to their first charted single, I Want to Hold Your Hand, released on December 26, 1963. It was also a very good representation of what the Beatles' music was all about. Beatles worked hard to absorb as well as create the beat music craze which swept Liverpool, London, and even Hamburg, West Germany in the early 60s. This song, unlike most others recorded this early in their career, is an accurate reflection of the swinging dance sound they were known for at the Cavern Club as well as other dance halls all over their hometown. So while American youth snapped their fingers and sang along to I Wanna Hold Your Hand, when they heard I Saw Her Standing There, they got up and danced. Songwriting history. That's Paul doing his usual good job of producing what George Martin used to call a potboiler, stated John Lennon about I Saw Her Standing There. George Martin would choose such a song as an opening track for the Beatles albums, a practice he started here with the British album Please Please Me. The history of the song, as can be determined by deciphering interviews throughout the years, dates back to 1962. The Beatles played various times in 1962 in Southport, such as July 23rd or July 26th, but recollections that is related in Mark Lewisham's book Tune In suggest that Paul had to be remembering a trip from a performance at the Queen's Hall in Widnes on October 22nd, 1962. After gigs, the Beatles were frequent Hurricaneville, the family home of Rory Storm and his sister Iris Caldwell, one of the girls Paul's dating at the time. The inspiration for I Saw Her Standing There, although unnamed at this time, apparently popped into Paul's head on the way to Hurricaneville on this evening, and upon his arrival, he grabbed an acoustic guitar to figure it out before he forgot it. He had the first two lines sketched in, which were she was just 17, she'd never been a beauty queen, and then he let it ruminate in his mind for a while. Rory Storm, blown away by witnessing a song being written before his eyes, asked Paul if he could have it exclusively for his own group, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, which formerly included Ringo Starr on the drums. Paul said yes, but most likely forgot about this verbal agreement shortly thereafter. With a couple of free days, Paul and another girlfriend, Celia Mortimer, decided to hitchhike to London together to visit Paul and John's old friend, Ivan Vaughan, who had introduced Paul to John back in 1957. In the book Tune In, Celia remembers the events of this adventure. We had an amazing time just wandering the streets in the sunshine, looking at London, holding hands and having fun. And Paul had the melody of what became I Saw Her Standing There going round his head all day, humming it and singing it and fleshing out the words. I remember walking around some lovely, elegant squares, looking at made-up rhyming lines, and asked me what I thought of them. He said, "What rhymes with 'we dance through the night'?" And I came up with "we hold each other tight," which was really quite naff, but he actually used it. He worked out a fair bit of the lyrics by the end of the day. But was there a girl in mind that Paul was singing about? Many suggest girlfriend Iris Caldwell, but Celia feels differently. I felt like the song was about us, but it wasn't said. It was implicit, but difficult to state openly because it made things terribly intimate. But I was very flattered and became for me an abiding memory of our trip to London. You guys should all know that Celia was indeed 17 at the time and actually did dance through the night. Coincidence, guys? Then, most likely, in the final days of 1962, just before the final Hamburg residency, Paul and John got together at Paul's home at 20 Forthlin Road in Liverpool to complete the song. We wrote it on guitars and a little bit on the piano, Paul related to author Mark Lewisham in his book Tune In. The title of the song was reportedly 17 at this stage, but inevitably changed to correspond with their established songwriting structure of ending every verse with the title of the song. It also allows the title of the song to contain a personal pronoun, I, which they tried to put into the song titles so their fans could personally relate to the songs. I Saw Her Standing There was my original, McCartney continued. I started it and I had the first verse, which therefore gave me the tune, the tempo and the key. It gave you the subject matter, a lot of the information, and then you had to fill in. With John and me on a song, if I come up with some lines which I know aren't really very good, and I'm hoping to fool him, I know I won't. Saw Her Standing There is the best example of it. I had She Was 17 and then Beauty Queen. I knew it was rubbish, and then I put it down just because it rhymed. When I showed it to John, he screamed with laughter and said, "You're joking about this, aren't you?" And then I realised, in fact, I was, and we changed it. I helped with a couple of the lyrics, remembered John. Paul elaborates, we stopped there, and both of us cringed and said, no, Beauty Queen is out. There's got to be another rhyme for 17. So we went through the alphabet. Between, clean, lean, mean. She wasn't mean. You know what I mean? Great! Put it in! Then the significance of it built as we sang it. It was a good way out of that problem. It was co-written, my idea, and we finished it that day. The innuendo, you know what I mean, possibly suggesting hooking up with underage girl, was then added to the lyrics in a Liverpool Institute exercise book they wrote their songs in. This song containing many scribbled out ideas. Paul's brother Michael has a picture taken on this day of Paul strumming a cheap Spanish acoustic guitar, possibly a Framus model, and John with his newly acquired Gibson J160E, as they both huddled around the exercise book, which was on the floor. John and I used to nick a lot, explains Paul. This word, a polite way of saying they stole ideas from other songs. If you really nick, then it's a disaster, but the way we did, it just gets you into the song, and in the end, you never noticed where it was nicked from. You put it all together, and it makes something original. Author Mark Lewisham gives some nick examples found in I Saw Her Standing There. One being the lyric, I saw her standing on the corner, from the Coasters hit Young Blood. The line, she's too cute to be a minute over 17, from Chuck Berry's Little Queenie, both songs being part of the Beatles set list at the time, and the medley line of the Beatles lyric, how could I dance with another since I saw her standing there, being nearly identical to I Want to Be in That Number When the Saints Go Marching In, a song that Paul learned on the trumpet back in 1955. Another interesting nick was the bass line that Paul had written for the song, taken directly from the 1961 Chuck Berry classic I'm Talking About You. I played the exact same notes as he did, and it fitted our number perfectly, McCartney relates. Even now, when I tell people about it, I find few of them believe me. Therefore, I maintain that a bass riff doesn't have to be original. This was the first Beatles song released with a high falsetto woo. This feature became a staple of the early catalogue of hits, as they closed their eyes, shook their head, and reached for the falsetto notes during their performances, which created a frenzied reaction, especially for admiring teen girls. Such was the impact on US audiences as they caught their first glimpse of the band on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1964. Recording history. The Beatles at this point had recorded and released 2 British singles with varying degrees of success. Love Me Do had reached number 17 in December 1962, and Please Please Me had reached number 2 in February 1963. In order to capitalize on the national success of their recent single, George Martin, the record producer, decided to hastily record an album to satisfy whatever needs their fanbase may have had. They were asked by George Martin what could be recorded quickly, as only one day was scheduled at the EMI studios for this purpose. The answer the Beatles gave was their stage act, which by this time contained the 5-month-old 17, as the song was still called at the time. They needed to record 10 songs to complete the album, which also include both sides of 2 previously released singles, to comprise the standard 14 songs per album in Britain. The recording date was February 11th, 1963, and the song 17 was recorded during the first session of that day, between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Being that the first song recorded in this session was There's a Place, and that they recorded 10 takes of that song, 17 must have been started around 11:30 a.m. While John experimented with playing harmonica on the song during rehearsals at the Cabin Club, in the later months of 1962, the group reverted to their standard lineup of guitars, bass, and drums in the studio on this day. They played the song live along with lead and background vocals, with no overdubs at this point. The first take of the song was complete and, for all intents and purposes, perfect. What is evident from this is that every aspect of the song was well rehearsed ahead of time. Beatles having performed this composition repeatedly in their stage act for many months. Interestingly, we see the production team purposely added a good amount of reverb on George Harrison's guitar only during his guitar solo. This was their attempt to make the solo stand out as different from the rest of the song, and as soon as the solo was over, they decreased the reverb level to sound as before. George Martin, though, thought this take could be improved upon. After engineer Norman Smith calls out for take 2, Lennon quietly counts down the song, but only he starts playing. Paul then quietly but commandingly counts down the song as planned, and everybody follows his lead. However, there are a number of flaws in take 2. Everything starts out fine, but John ends up coming in singing harmony in the second verse with How Could I Dance from the first verse, instead of She Wouldn't Dance like he should have. Then in the third verse, there must have been some confusion by both John and Paul as to what the correct lyrics were, since both awkwardly stumbled into the line She Wouldn't Dance instead of Now I'll Never Dance as it should have been. We also can easily determine by this take that George's guitar solo was ad-libbed, since it was quite different from the first take, although very well performed. Finally, in their repeat of the third verse, they both get the lyrics right, but Paul probably figured out they messed up the song too badly, ended the song with a falling note on his bass guitar, while John commented to Paul about their mistakes. Apparently not noticing the obvious vocal errors, George Martin suggested they perform an edit piece to correct the flubbed ending. Take 3, therefore, was a short edit piece which consisted of 3 times repeat of "Since I Saw Her Standing There" at the song's end, along with the final conclusion. Having accomplished this edit piece acceptably, George Martin's next idea was to have the Beatles perform an edit piece for the guitar solo, but this time without as much reverb, with the more exciting screams from John and Paul. Take 4 was their first attempt at this edit piece, which began with the last 4 measures of the third verse as an introduction. George Harrison's ad-lib guitar solo wasn't quite as good, but they tried it again as take 5. After practicing their woos, they started off take 5 too fast, and although they shouted more during the solo, the actual guitar solo wasn't very good at all, which rendered this edit piece useless as well. Having abandoned this idea, a decision was made to just start the song all over again from scratch. Before take 6 begins, Paul concerns himself verbally on how to remember the correct lyrics and how to get the right tempo for the song. After another quiet countdown, take 6 begins, but breaks down during the second verse because Paul keeps getting the lyrics wrong. "Yeah, but I mean it's too fast anyway," he tells Norman Smith, who called the song to a halt. Already feeling the frustration of having to do the song so many times, Paul exclaims, "And again," before he starts off take 7, which he himself stops because he feels it's going too fast. Showing himself as the perfectionist that he is, Paul explains, "And again, I'm sorry, you know," and he tries to demonstrate to the group what the correct tempo for the song should be. Take 8 begins fine, but when Ringo accidentally misses hitting the hi-hat during the first verse, everybody stops promptly, and Paul asks, "What happened?" But clearly frustrated, Paul counts down take 9 with a loud 1, 2, 3, 4, which propels the group through another complete verse of the song. This spirited performance was excellent. They even got the lyrics correct. Being 1 PM already, everyone involved must have felt the song was completed and decided to finally move along to the next, but not before lunch. The Beatles, however, decided to skip eating and stayed in the empty studio to drink milk to practice for the rest of the session. Little did they know at the time they would return to the song later that day. At some point, George Martin thought having the group clap their hands throughout the song would create an exciting atmosphere, so about 4:45 PM, the Beatles gathered around the microphone to do just that. Take 10 was a playback of take 9 in order for them to perform this overdub, but upon listening to it, George Martin decided that he liked take 1 better after all. So the first take of the song was spooled up for the hand clap overdub. Take 11 only made it through the first few measures and the first verse before the tape was stopped because it wasn't at a loud enough volume. The Beatles kept clapping afterwards, which motivated Paul to say, "We have to keep Britain tidy," and got them all laughing. The EMI staff started playing tape 1 again at the proper volume as the group clapped their hands, with reverb all the way through the song. This became take 12, which was now considered their new best. Therefore, the song was actually complete by 5 PM. Both the mono and stereo mixes of the song, as well as the rest of the other 10 songs recorded on February 11th, were created on February 25th, 1963, in the control room of EMI Studio 1 by George Martin, Norman Smith, and second engineer A.B. Lincoln. Before any mixing took place on this day, George Martin decided to edit in Paul's excited 1, 2, 3, 4 countdown for the song from take 9 into the beginning of what was now take 12. He felt this would add the desired pot boiler atmosphere he wanted for the song. After the edit was made, both the mono and stereo mixes were created from this edited master. This became the exuberant kickoff to soon be released first British album entitled Please Please Me, with Love Me Do and 12 other tracks. The original Take 9 can be heard on the CD single For Free as a Bird, which was released on December 31st, 1995. An interesting side note is that the song did see the recording studio another time by a former Beatle on July 21st, 1987. That I Saw Her Standing There, along with 21 other classic rock and roll standards, as contenders for an album originally released in Russia entitled Kuba BCCCP, which is Russian for Back in the USSR. The album did receive a worldwide release in 1991, but no version of the album contains this version of the song. McCartney decided not to include it on the album, and it remains unreleased to this day. On June 23rd, 1994, the surviving three Beatles met at George's private studio in Frere Park, home of Henley-on-Thames, England, to film and record footage for possible inclusion in the anthology television special. With Paul and George on acoustic guitars and Ringo on drums, playing with brushes, they went through a variety of older songs that they played and performed during the Beatles in the Cavern days and even back during the Quarrymen period. Anthology TV director Bob Smeaton recalls, "There's a whole lot of that stuff. We were there for a day. They did a whole lot of rock and roll songs." Producer Jeff Lynne remembers, "It was just a time warp kind of thing. We played some old rock and roll stuff and a couple of chopped berries. Even I Saw Her Standing There. Neither the recording nor the film footage have yet to be released." Thanks for listening to Dig a Podcast. You can subscribe to our podcast on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform. This has been a Team Wilgo production. Until next time, if you know what I mean. Do I did? No? Okay.